Hello YouTube, this is Dazzathecameraman. Today is Monday, November 14, 2016. It's just gone 10:30 AM and this is an update to my recent video, Breaking News, Massive Earthquake here in New Zealand. Just after midnight we had a massive earthquake here in New Zealand. I mentioned in my previous video that GeoNet had rated it at a magnitude 6.6. I said that I did believe that it was stronger than that, and they have actually revised it up to magnitude 7.5. Now some people may be aware that the USGS figure is slightly different. I believe that they have it as magnitude 7.8. That is due to a discrepancy between the type of magnitude measurement that New Zealand GeoNet use and USGS use. There is a slightly different model which explains a slight difference in magnitude. I'm planning to put together a more detailed video. There's a lot of information to cover and I only got a couple of hours sleep since the earthquake last night. So my brain is mush at the moment, so this is just a quick update video, and I hope to put together a more detailed and precise video for you later on. I can tell you that I am safe. I'm well away from the epicenter of the earthquake, even though I did feel it quite strongly here at my location. All of my family and loved ones are safe. There have been 2 deaths reported as a result of this earthquake, and some injuries. There has been damage done, including to roads and infrastructure, but again, more details on that later. It was certainly a very strong earthquake felt here, but there's one thing that I want to cover in this from the get-go, and of course you've got the people that are going to come out and talk about 2 things. They're going to talk about the supermoon event, which is about to happen very shortly, where the moon is at its closest point to the Earth, closest approach in about 70 years. The other thing is people want to blame Nibiru, Planet X. It's important to remember that New Zealand, as with a lot of different locations around the world, is on an active fault line. We're on what's known as the Pacific Rim of Fire, which is a geologically very active zone around the Pacific, and in fact New Zealand is basically one big long fault line. If you look at the southern Alps of New Zealand, it is formed through tectonic plates colliding, pushing the southern Alps up, and we have to remember that the land around the world is formed in different ways. You've either got buckling of land due to tectonic plates colliding, or you've got mountains being pushed up due to volcanic activity. You know, the contours of the land come about for a reason, and the earth is dynamic, it's always changing, and earthquakes are a natural process for the earth, which have been going on forever and will go on forever. And in fact, my debunking work actually started 5.5 years ago as a result of a major earthquake here in New Zealand back in 2011, in February of 2011. And it was a result of earthquake predictions that were made by a New Zealand personality by the name of Ken Ring, who predicted that there would be a massive earthquake in Christchurch of New Zealand on the 20th of March 2011 because of the supermoon event on that date. Well, there was no such earthquake, and as a result of his predictions, I checked back on the history of all the major earthquakes in New Zealand going back to about 1850, and here is that work that I created back at that time in 2011. The following chart shows all of the major earthquakes in New Zealand since 1843 and the phase of the moon when the earthquakes occurred. One complete cycle of the moon takes 29.53 days, or 29.5 days. The moon is considered full between 14.27 and 15.26 days old. It is considered new, a new moon, between 29.03 and 0.5 days old. The figures given in bold with an asterisk indicate that the exact time of the quake has been used. For all other quakes, the time has been given as 12 p.m. midday. So here's a list of all the major earthquakes in New Zealand going back to 1843 and comparing to the phases of the moon. And it was quite convenient because on my list I actually had 28 earthquakes, and given that the lunar month is approximately 28 days or 29.5 days, statistically, you've got pretty much one earthquake per day of the lunar month. And as I scroll down to the next page, you can see I've given another breakdown here showing the occurrences of earthquakes on each day of the lunar month, with day 1 being the new moon and day 14, day 15 being the full moon. So for each X on here represents one of these major earthquakes in New Zealand, and you can see I've listed a few of them here out on the right hand side. And what we see is that there was no correlation between earthquakes at new moon or full moon, when the sun, the moon and the earth are pretty much in a direct line. And at the time I started debunking, my attention was drawn to videos by an Australian who calls himself the Bar Caroller or the Bar Caroller, who made earthquake predictions based on planetary alignments. He actually had his alignments wrong, as it turned out. That's how I started off debunking his alignments. But the logic of using planetary alignments to predict earthquakes, well, we know that the gravitational influence of the moon does cause the ocean tides, so it would seem to stand to reason that the moon would also cause earthquakes. Well, I'm sure that the moon does have an effect on the Earth's tectonics. It has to. But what we don't see is an increase or a tide, if you like, of earthquake activity around every full moon or new moon when the sun, the earth and the moon are almost in a straight line. Of course, if they're in a perfectly straight line, it would be either a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse. And again, even during an eclipse, we don't see a sudden increase in major earthquakes. There is some evidence to suggest that the moon does influence much smaller quakes, but nothing that can really be predicted. And I think that information is really borne out in this analysis that I did of these earthquakes going back to 1843. We can see clusters of earthquakes which actually bear no relation to the new moon or the full moon, and if anything, we see that there seems to be less activity around a full moon or a new moon than what we see at other times. For example, we've got a bit of a run of earthquakes here between full moon and new moon, but nothing significant. In fact, the only earthquake that did coincide with full moon was the major earthquake back in 1931 in Hawke's Bay, the Napier earthquake. But again, statistically, because we've got 28 earthquake events over several years and basically 28 days per lunar month, or 29.5, statistically you would expect that there would be one earthquake event per day anyway. And as for comments about Nibiru, Planet X and all of that nonsense, well, as I've already covered in the first part of this video, New Zealand and different parts of the world are geologically active, always have been, as I've shown in that list that I just showed. The other thing, of course, that we can go to Wikipedia and pull up a list of major earthquakes in New Zealand. You can check them out going back decades, even previous centuries. And so, as I say, earthquake activity is pretty normal. So anyway, I guess this video has morphed into a more detailed video, but hopefully I will have more for you later. Just before I go, let's take a look at the moon at the time of the earthquake. Certainly it was very close. This was at 12:02 AM New Zealand time, New Zealand Daylight Saving Time, on November the 14th, 2016, which was at 11:02 UTC time, November 13th. And if we look at the distance to the moon, and this is from the Earth center to the moon center, which is the way that we properly measure the distance to the moon, the distance was 357,548 kilometers. And if we go back to Wikipedia, we can see the data for the moon here. The distance to the moon, the average distance to the moon is 384,400 kilometers approximately. Then you've got the perigee, which is the closest approach of the moon, and the apogee, which is the furthest distance of the moon. So with the perigee and the apogee, you've also got an average figure, and you've also got the minimum and maximum distances for each. So if we look at the perigee, which is the minimum distance to the moon, then the actual minimum distance is 356,400 kilometers. And going back to Starry Night, we see that the distance was 357,548. And I checked the closest distance that the moon will be, the closest point for the supermoon event. At its closest point, it will be at 356,512 kilometers, and that will be at 11:18 UTC on November 14. So there's a quick update for you. I will bring you more later, and yes, we're all safe. I'll put links in the description area as I did under my original video. If you want to, you can listen to the local national radio, New Zealand. They're giving updates on what's happening with the earthquakes. Of course, there are aftershocks, which is a normal process for such a major earthquake. That is quite normal. And I'll keep you informed if there are any major developments. So I'd like to thank everyone for their concern and their thoughts and their prayers and the messages that I've been receiving. Much appreciated. As I say, I and my family are all safe, and I do appreciate your concern. So thank you for watching.